Chapter 4, Part 2. Well after the sun had set in the west and the clamor from outside his window had subsided, Lawrence looked up from the desk. Pen in hand, he raised both arms and stretched expansively. His back popped gratifyingly, and he turned his head left and right to work out the kinks in his neck, which also popped. He looked back down to the desk. On it was a sheet of paper with simple plans for a shop, the town it would be situated in, the goods it would sell, and plans for its expansion. Written separately were construction costs, plans for securing citizenship, and a variety of other anticipated expenditures. It was a plan for realizing his dream, to own a shop. Even a week ago, this remained only a fantasy, but since Lawrence had made his deal with the Malone Company, it suddenly felt much more imminent. If he could bring in 2,000 treni, then after selling some ornaments and jewels that amounted to his savings, he would be able to open his shop. Lawrence would be a traveling merchant no longer, but a town merchant. What's that sound? While Lawrence had been absorbed in gazing at the picture of the shop he'd drawn, Holo had at some point awoken. Her eyes were still blurry with sleep, but she appeared mostly recovered. She looked at Lawrence, blinked a few times, and dragged herself out of bed. Her eyes were slightly swollen, but she looked well enough. How do you feel? Better. A bit hungry, though. If your appetite's back, you must be fine, said Lawrence, smiling and indicating the bread on the table. It was dark rye bread, the worst, cheapest bread you could get, but Lawrence enjoyed its bitter flavor and bought it frequently. Unsurprisingly, Holo made her displeasure with the bread known after a single bite, but ultimately gave up, since there was nothing else to eat. Is there anything to drink? The water jug's right there. Holo checked to see that the jug actually contained water and, after taking a drink, moved next to Lawrence as she munched away on the bread. A drawing of a shop? My shop. Oh, not bad, said Holo, looking intently at the paper as she ate. When traveling in a country whose language he didn't speak, Lawrence would use drawings to make deals. Sometimes he simply couldn't remember the name of a particular commodity, and interpreters were not always available. Hence, most traveling merchants were good at drawing. Whenever Lawrence turned a healthy profit, he would draw a picture of his future shop. It made him feel even better than drinking wine. And while he had confidence in his drawing abilities, it was nice to be praised. What's this writing? Location and expense planning. I don't expect it to go exactly like this, of course. You've drawn parts of a city, too, I see. What city is it? None in particular, just an idealized city for my shop. Ho-ho! You've been very detailed here. I suppose you're planning to open it soon, then? If the deal with the Malone Company goes well, I will probably be able to. Holo nodded, not looking terribly excited at the idea. She popped a piece of bread into her small mouth, then walked back over to the table. Lawrence imagined that the ensuing gulping sound was her finishing the water. It's every traveling merchant's dream to have a shop. I'm no different. I know. You've even gone so far as to sketch out your ideal city, so you must have done this many times before. When I draw it, I feel that it will happen someday. An artist I knew long ago said something like that, but he wanted to paint all the scenes he saw before him. Holo bit into a second slice of bread and sat on the corner of the bed. I doubt the artist would have fulfilled his dream even now, but it seems that yours is getting closer. Indeed, when I think about it, I can hardly stay still. I want to run around the Malone Company, swatting the ass of every employee I see. It was a bit of an exaggeration, but far from a lie. Perhaps that was why Holo refrained from making fun, simply chuckling and saying, I hope your dream comes true, then. She continued, Still, is having a shop such a good thing? Can't you do well as a traveling merchant? If you profit, sure. Holo cocked her head slightly. What else would there be? A traveling merchant might make the rounds between 20 or 30 towns. If you don't keep moving, you won't make any money at all. Most of your year is spent on a wagon. Lawrence sipped a bit of wine from the cup on the table. The life being what it is, you don't really make many friends, just business associates. Hearing his explanation, Holo seemed to realize something and to regret asking the question. She really is a good sort, Lawrence thought, and he continued, hoping to assuage her regret. But if I could open a shop, I'd become a true citizen of a town. I could make friends, and it would be simple to search for a wife. It would be a great solace to me to know where I would be buried when I die. Though finding a bride who will stay beside me even in death, that will take some luck. Holo laughed slightly. Among traveling merchants, the act of going to a new city to dig up new goods was known as searching for a wife, as it carried the sense of going to find something rare and valuable. In reality, though, simply opening up a shop did not guarantee that one would be close to the citizens of the town. Nonetheless, being able to stay on the same piece of land for a long time was every merchant's dream. "It will be bad for me if you open a shop, though," said Holo. "Why is that?" said Lawrence, turning around. Although her smile had not disappeared, it was tinged with sadness. "If you open a shop, you won't want to leave it. I'll have to either travel alone or find a different companion." Lawrence then remembered that Holo had said she wished to travel the world for a while, then return to her homeland in the north. But she had her wits. She had the money she'd made from the fur sale. Surely she would be fine on her own. "You could travel alone, though, right?" Lawrence had no particular agenda behind the words, but upon hearing them, Holo silently looked down as she ate her bread. "I'm tired of being alone," she blurted out, looking suddenly childish as she swung her legs, which didn't quite reach the floor, over the edge of the bed. She fell back and seemed so small that even the flickering candlelight threatened to swallow her. Lawrence recalled the time Holo had so fondly reminisced about her friend from centuries earlier. Dwelling so nostalgically on the past proved she was lonely. He remembered how she looked then, curled up as if to protect herself from a storm of isolation. Lawrence chose his words very carefully to avoid hurting her feelings. She didn't often show this side of herself. "I expect I'll stay with you until you're back home in the North Country, though." He had little choice but to say as much, but nonetheless Holo looked up with an expression that said, "Really?" in a rather humble manner. Lawrence carefully concealed the excitement he felt and continued, "Even when the money comes in, I won't be able to open up a store right away." "Truly?" "Why would I lie?" said Lawrence. He couldn't help smiling bitterly. Holo too smiled, but in relief. The slight downward cast of her eyes made her seem somehow tinged with loneliness. Lawrence was struck with the incongruous realization that her eyelashes were really quite long. "So come on, don't make that face," he added. A city merchant would probably have been able to come up with something more effective to say, but unfortunately Lawrence was always traveling and forced into a life absent of women. Still, Holo looked up and smiled slightly. "Mm-hmm," she assented with a nod. Seeing such a small girl so meek made her seem almost fleeting somehow. The wolf ears she normally held so high lay flat and directionless, and her proud tail curled up uncertainly next to her body. It was suddenly silent. Lawrence continued to watch Holo, who seemed unable to return his gaze. She glanced at him just once, then quickly looked away. Lawrence felt he'd seen this before. Sifting through his memories, he realized it had been the apple incident, shortly after they had arrived in Pasio. She'd wanted apples then. What did she need now? Understanding another person's desire was a singularly important skill for a merchant. Lawrence took a deep breath and stood. Surprised by the sudden noise, Holo's ears and tail twitched, and she regarded Lawrence. Flustered by his sudden approach, she looked away. She reached her hands out to him as he stood before her, tremulously, almost frightened. "Was it crying in your sleep that made your eyes red?" Lawrence took her hand and sat beside her. He pulled her close and held her gently. "When I... When I open my eyes, they're gone. Yui, Inti, Paro, and Mayuri, they're all gone. They're nowhere." She was talking about her dream. Lawrence stroked her head softly as she sniffled. The names she'd mentioned must have been her wolf friends, perhaps even fellow wolf gods, but he was far from insensitive enough to ask. I can live for centuries. So I thought I would go traveling. I was sure, so very sure that I'd see them all again, but they were gone. There was no one." Holo's hand trembled as she grasped Lawrence's shirt. Lawrence himself didn't want to be plagued by such dreams. If he were to return to his hometown, not a soul would remember him. Sometimes he had similar nightmares. There were tales of merchants who'd left their homeland and not returned for 20 or 30 years. They would finally return home to find their village simply gone. It might have been razed to the ground in a war, or stricken by plague or famine. There were any number of possible reasons. This is why traveling merchants dreamed of owning a shop. A shop meant a home, making a place for oneself. "I don't want to open my eyes and find no one there. I'm tired of being alone. It's cold. It's lonely." Lawrence remained silent at her outpouring of emotion, only stroking her head. She was so distressed that anything he said would likely fall on deaf ears, and he couldn't think of anything appropriate to say anyway. He himself had been assailed by the winds of loneliness when riding his wagon or entering a new town. There was nothing one could do in such times, nothing one could hear and find consoling. The only thing to do was find something to grab hold of and wait out the storm. Holo continued to cry. Lawrence held her, and at length the waves of emotion subsided and she let go of his clothes, looking up at him. He let go of her, and she sat up, still sniffling. "How humiliating," said Holo, her nose and eyes still red but her voice calm. "Traveling merchants have dreams like that too," said Lawrence. Holo giggled shyly and sniffled through her stuffed-up nose. "Your face is a mess. Hang on." Lawrence stood and took the paper from the desk. The drawings and figures on the sheet were dry, so he thought it would be okay for her to blow her nose on it. "But this is your... I always throw them away when I'm done. The deal isn't even finished yet. It's too early to be optimistic," said Lawrence with a smile. Holo returned his smile and took the paper. After blowing her nose mightily on it and wiping her eyes, she looked much better. She sighed and took a deep breath, then looked sheepish once more. Seeing her like this, Lawrence wanted to embrace her again, but refrained. Holo was herself again, and he would likely be made light of. "I'm in your debt now," she said, picking up the now crumbled bread and eating it. It was unclear whether or not she discerned his thoughts. Relieved in any case that he hadn't been chided, he watched her as she finished eating and yawned, dusting her hands free from crumbs. She was probably tired from crying. "I'm still sleepy. Can you sleep?" she asked. "Soon, yes. Staying awake any longer would be a waste of candlelight." "Spoken like a true merchant," said Holo, smiling as she sat cross-legged on the bed, then lay down. After taking one last look at her, Lawrence blew the candle out. Darkness fell instantly. As his eyes were still used to the light, it seemed pitch black. The weather was clear and the stars were out. He couldn't yet see the faint light that filtered through the wooden window. As he waited for his eyes to adjust, Lawrence felt his way to his own bed beneath the window in the corner of the room, careful not to trip over Holo's bed on his way. Finally he made it, and, after feeling the edge of the bed, lay down on it. In the past, Lawrence had bruised himself by carelessly flinging himself toward the bed and accidentally hitting the edge. He had learned to be careful. But there was no way for him to be prepared for what awaited him. As he started to lie down in the bed, he realized someone was already in it. What are you?" "Don't be such a prude," said Holo in an irritated voice that was nonetheless flirtatious. Lawrence let himself be pulled down, and Holo pressed herself against him. Unlike before when he'd held her gently, this embrace was tight. He felt her unmistakably soft body. Lawrence's rising heartbeat could not be controlled. He was a healthy man, after all. He'd embraced her tightly almost before he realized it. "Can't breathe," came Holo's constricted voice. He returned to his senses and relaxed his arms, but did not let go of her. She made no move to push him away. Instead, she drew close to his ear and whispered, "Have your eyes adjusted yet? What do you mean?" he was about to say, but Holo cut him off with a finger pressed to his lips. "I finally remembered what I was going to say to you." Her whispering voice was itchy indeed, though her sweetly intimate tone was gone, replaced by an alarming edge to her voice. "It's a bit late. There are 3 people outside the door. I doubt they are guests." Lawrence finally realized that Holo was already wearing her cloak. She rummaged around quietly, and soon all of Lawrence's belongings appeared on his chest. "We're on the 2nd story. Fortunately, there is no one outside. Are you ready?" Growing excited in a completely different sense now, Holo got up. Lawrence pretended to draw the blanket over himself and put on his clothes. Just as he was affixing his silver dagger to his waist, Holo spoke loudly, her voice purposely carrying beyond the closed door. "Come, see my body neath the moonlight." As soon as she finished, Lawrence heard a window clatter open. Holo perched on the windowsill and jumped down without hesitation. Lawrence scrambled after her, putting his foot on the sill. He didn't hesitate either, because behind him came the sound of the door being pried open, followed by heavy footsteps. He felt unpleasantly weightless for a moment, but his feet soon collided with the hard ground. Unable to bear the force of the impact, Lawrence landed in a squatting position. He was lucky not to have broken his leg, but Holo still laughed loudly at him, although she did extend her hand. "We'll have to run. We've no time to collect the horse." A stunned Lawrence glanced back at the stables. The horse had been strong and cheap, but more importantly, it was the first thing he'd ever bought. Part of him wanted to make a break for the stables, but prudence told him not to. Holo's course of action was the right one. Lawrence clenched his teeth and restrained himself. "They will gain nothing by killing your horse. We'll wait for things to calm before retrieving it, yes?" said Holo by way of consolation. Lawrence could only hope that it was true. He nodded and took a deep breath, grabbing her outstretched hand and pulling himself up. Oh, also... Holo took the pouch that hung from her neck and undid the string that bound it closed. She poured roughly half of the wheat it contained into her hand. Just in case, you should take some too, she said, casually thrusting the grains into the pocket on his chest without waiting for his reply. They felt warm. It was probably Holo's body heat. After all, it was the wheat in which she lived. Right, now let's run. Holo smiled as though speaking with a trusted friend. Lawrence was about to reply, but simply nodded his head and dashed with her toward the town in the night. So, what I was going to say to you was this. If the Malone Company could check up on that boy, surely the reverse is true. His backers were bound to be alerted. If they discover we're gone to another company with a deal, they'll try to silence us, no? The only light on the cobbled path was the moon, but it was enough to see by. They continued to run without spotting another person, then turned down an alley. Lawrence could barely see anything in the darkness there. Holo led him on, tugging on his hand as she ran, Lawrence stumbling after her. They ran near an intersection and saw a group of men behind them shouting. He caught the words Malone Company among their shouts. They too knew that the only place Lawrence and Holo would find sanctuary was the Malone Company. Oops, I don't know the way, said Holo, still pulling on Lawrence's hand as they came to a fork. Lawrence looked up and checked the moon's position and phase and mentally roughed out a map of Pasio. This way. They ran down the western fork. This part of Pasio was old. Buildings were constantly being rebuilt, and the road wound through them like a snake. But Lawrence had visited Pasio many times. Furtively checking their position against the main road as they went, the pair came closer and closer to the Malone Company. But their opponents were no fools. Stop! There's a guard. They needed only to turn right at this intersection, follow the road to its end, then turn left. 4 blocks later, they'd be at the Malone Company. There should still be men loading and unloading wagons at this hour. If they could make it there, the thugs wouldn't be able to touch them. In a city of commerce, the best security was the wealth implied by the signboard of a large business. We're so close. I've not hunted in many years, but this is my first time being hunted. This is no time for jokes. Oh well, we'll have to take the long way around. Lawrence backtracked to the original road, turning right along it. He decided that they'd take an alley after the next block and circle around to the Malone Company. But he was stopped after he made his first right turn. Holo grabbed his shirt and pushed him against the wall. Did you find them? They should be close by. Find them! The current of fear that ran through him was worse than when he'd been chased by wolves in the forest. 2 men came dashing violently out of a nearby alley. If Holo hadn't stopped, she and Lawrence might have run right into them. Damn, there are too many of them, and they know the area. 'Tis a bad situation, said Holo. Her hood was down, exposing her wolf ears as she scanned left and right. Shall we split up? Not a bad idea, but I have a better one. Which is? Footsteps could be heard nearby. Undoubtedly, every main road now had a guard on it. They'd be cornered as soon as they tried to use one. I'll head down the main road and draw them off. Then you can take the chance to... Wait, you can't. Now you listen. If we split up, you're the one that will be caught. On my own, I won't be caught, but you will. And when that happens, who is going to go to the company? Shall I show them my ears and tail and beg for your rescue? Well... Lawrence had no retort. He had already informed the Malone Company about the depreciating Trenny silver. They might even abandon him and Holo both. Should that happen, his only recourse would be to play himself as a trump card and threaten to invest in their opponent. And only he could conduct those negotiations. Either way, it's no good. If the Malone Company sees your ears and tail, they may turn you over to the church, and I needn't mention the Medio Company. So all I need do is avoid capture, and should I be caught, I'll just hide my ears and tail for a day while you come to rescue me. Perhaps because of her bravado, Lawrence wanted to stop her from doing this that much more. She smiled up at him. I'm Holo the Wise Wolf. Even if my ears and tail are discovered, I'll pretend to be a mad wolf, and none will want to come near me, she grinned, showing her fangs. Yet all Lawrence could think of was embracing the sobbing girl who spoke of loneliness, with her impossibly slight form. He couldn't imagine turning her over to these hired thugs. Still smiling, Holo continued. Your dream is to own a shop, is it not? And just a moment ago I said I was in your debt. Are you trying to make a dishonorable wolf of me? Don't be foolish. If you're caught, you'll be killed. What honor is there in that? I'll wind up owing you a debt I can never repay, raged Lawrence, his voice low. Holo smiled thinly and shook her head. She poked him lightly in the chest with her slender forefinger. Loneliness is a deadly illness. We are even. Lawrence had no words at the sight of her calm, grateful smile. Holo took advantage of the silence and continued. Besides, you're a quick thinker and clever. I promise. I trust you. I know you'll come for me. She quickly embraced the silent Lawrence and then slipped free of his grasp, dashing away. There they are, on Loin Road. As soon as Holo ran out of the alley, the shouts could be heard, and the pursuers' footsteps grew distant. Lawrence clamped his eyes shut for a moment, then forced them open and ran. If he missed this chance, he might never see Holo again. He quickly ran down the dark alley, stumbling a few times, but always moving forward. He crossed the wide road and entered another alley, heading west. The commotion continued, but his opponent could not afford to make noise for long, lest they alert the town guard. He continued running, sprinting again across the main road and heading down another alley. He needed only to turn right, then left on the next main road to reach the Malone Company. Just one? There should be two. Lawrence heard the voice come from behind him. Had Holo been captured? Did she escape? If she'd escaped, that was fine. No. He hoped desperately that it was so. He jumped onto the moonlit boulevard and turned immediately left. Soon he heard voices behind him. There he is! Ignoring them, he sprinted with all his strength, hurling himself against the gates of the Malone Company's loading area. I'm Lawrence. I came earlier today. Help! I'm being pursued! Wakened into action by the commotion, the men on duty opened the iron gate. Immediately after Lawrence disappeared behind it, a group of men carrying wooden staves rushed up to the gate. Wait, you! Give that man to us, said one of them, hitting the gate with his stave. The men began trying to use force to pull the gate open, but those who held the gate closed on the opposite side were used to long days of loading and unloading. The gate would not open so easily. A bearded man on the far side of middle age emerged from within the company building. Scum! He roared. Whose house do you think this is? It is the Malone Company's Pazio branch, owned by the Honorable Marquis Malone, recognized by His Grace, the 33rd Archduke of Roandale. Anyone within these walls is a guest of the Marquis. Know that when you strike these gates, you strike His Grace's throne. Cowed by the man's grand speech, the attackers faltered. Just then, the whistle of the city guard sounded. The men seemed to realize this was their chance to escape. They soon scattered. Within the gates, everything was still for a while. At length, the sounds of footfalls and guard whistles faded, and the man who delivered the impressive speech finally spoke up again. That's quite a commotion so late at night. What's going on here? My humblest apologies, sir. I offer my deepest gratitude for your sanctuary. Save your thanks for the Grand Marquis of Malone. What do they want? I expect they were from the Medio Company. Undoubtedly they are displeased with the deal I've struck with your company. Oh, you're a merchant who will take risks. I haven't seen many of your kind lately. Lawrence wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled. It's my partner that's the reckless one. Must be rough. I don't want to think about it, but that same partner may have been captured. Would it be possible for me to speak with the branch manager, Sir Marhe? We're a foreign company. Raids and arson are a fact of life for us. He's already been contacted, said the man with a hearty laugh. It drove home to Lawrence how formidable the man who ran this operation must be. Perhaps they really would be able to guarantee his safety. Uncertainty swirled in his mind, but Lawrence soon composed himself. He would get them to guarantee not only his safety, but his profit too. His pride as a merchant and his debt to Holo, who'd taken such a risk for him, demanded no less. Lawrence took a deep breath. Anyway, come inside, will you? Even wine gets better with time, said the man. Lawrence, thinking about Holo as he was, found it hard to calm himself. Still, the old man was used to situations like this, and seeing Lawrence's agitated state, he offered some consolation. In any case, if your partner's all right, he'll come here, eh? As long as you give us his name and description, we'll shelter him even if the church itself comes after him. It was an exaggeration, but it put Lawrence at ease. My thanks. Surely, no. Without question she'll come. Her name is Holo. She's a small girl and wears a hood over her head. A girl, eh? Is she a beauty? Lawrence understood that the man was asking in order to ease his fears, so he smiled and answered. Of 10 people, all of them would turn to look at her. Ha ha ha! That's something to look forward to, then, laughed the big man heartily, and he led Lawrence into the company building. 8 or 9 out of 10 of them will be medio men. Although he had probably just been awakened, Marhe's manner was no different than it had been earlier in the day as he skipped the pleasantries. I agree. They've discovered that I came to you for assistance with my plan for the silver coin and are trying to stop us. Lawrence didn't want his agitation to be obvious, but he couldn't help worrying about Holo as he talked. Holo being who she was, he thought there was a chance she'd escaped, but it was best to assume the worst. In any case, he needed guarantees of both his and Holo's safety as fast as he could get them, and for that, he needed the Malone Company. I believe my companion may have been captured. If so, it seems obvious to me that negotiations will be impossible. Will the Malone lend its aid? Asked Lawrence, only avoiding leaning over the table with effort. Marhe seemed deep in thought and did not face Lawrence. Finally, he looked up, slowly. You say your companion may have been captured? Yes. I see. After the commotion here, I sent some of my men to follow them. They reported seeing a girl taken, apparently against her will. Despite more than half expecting Marhe's words, Lawrence felt them grab hold of his heart and shake him desperately. He swallowed his shock and managed to get some words out. That is probably my companion, Holo. She acted as a decoy so I could make it here. I see, but what would make them want to capture your partner? Lawrence had almost physically restrained himself from shouting. He couldn't afford to lose his temper in the pressure of a man like Marhe. I expect it's because we joined with your company in trying to thwart their plans. Marhe's countenance remained impassive in spite of Lawrence's heated response. He stared down at the table and appeared deep in thought. Lawrence, distressed, couldn't help bouncing his leg impatiently. He was about to jump up from the chair and begin shouting when Marhe spoke again. It's a bit strange, though, don't you think? What's strange? Demanded Lawrence, finally jumping out of his chair, causing Marhe to blink rapidly for a moment before regaining his composure. Marhe reached his hand out to his distressed visitor. Please calm yourself. Something is strange about all this. What's strange about it? Just as your company was able to easily check up on Zarin, it was simple for the Medio Company to see if anybody was interfering with their plan. True, given that their headquarters are here. So what is strange? Indeed, I understand now. This truly is strange, said Marhe. Lawrence had no choice but to hear him out. I was thinking, how did they come to realize that you were conspiring with our company? Surely because I came here frequently. Also, if they noticed that you had started collecting Trenny silver, all they have to do is put two and two together. That is the strange part. You're a traveling merchant, after all. Visiting us several times to negotiate is entirely natural. But if they link that to your company's interest in Trenny silver and the fact that I'm the one Zarin contacted... No, it's still strange. Why? Lawrence did not realize. Impatience colored his voice. Naturally, the point at which we started gathering Trenny silver was after we finished negotiating with you. Consider this, Mr. Lawrence. I cannot say how it will happen, but if you collect Trenny silver, your profit is guaranteed. We certainly wouldn't do anything based on that alone, would we? True. The fact that we are indeed collecting Trenny silver means we understand the entirety of this opportunity. Undoubtedly, the Medio Company also knows this. There's simply no reason to take you as hostages. Surely you don't mean... Marhe nodded, his face expressing sad regret. I do. We already have all the information we need to turn a profit. What happens to you now is not our concern. Feeling dizzy, Lawrence listed to one side. It was true. Lawrence was a single traveling merchant. No one was looking out for him. I hope you will understand how difficult it is for me to say this, but we've already invested a significant amount of capital based on the information you brought us. The profit will be immense. If we must choose between bearing your grudge or giving up the return, then... Marhe sighed. I'm sorry, but I must choose the former, he said quietly. Still. Lawrence didn't hear what Marhe said after that. In some small corner of his mind, he wondered if this was what it felt like to meet with bankruptcy. His arms, legs, indeed his entire body, felt frozen. He wasn't even sure if he was still breathing. He was now, as of this moment, abandoned by the Malone Company, which meant Holo had also been abandoned. Holo, who had given herself up to let him escape, believing that Lawrence would be able to negotiate her rescue with the Malone Company. Lawrence recalled the expression on her face when she spoke of returning to the North Country. When hostages had outlived their usefulness, their subsequent prospects were clear. Men were sold to slave ships and women to brothels. Although Holo had her wolf ears and tail, there were rich eccentrics who collected such demon-possessed girls. Undoubtedly, the Medio Company knew one or two such collectors. Lawrence thought of Holo being sold. He thought of how a wealthy, demon-obsessed collector would treat such a girl. No, he would not allow it. Lawrence straightened himself in the chair and immediately began thinking. He had to save her. Please wait, he said after several moments. If your company has come to this conclusion, surely the other side has done so as well. The Medio Company wasn't run by fools. They had gone after Lawrence and his companion and had dispatched many men to do it, even risking confrontation with the town guard. Yes, that is what struck me as so strange. I hadn't finished speaking, you see. If the need arises, I will bear the grudge that you would harbor toward the company. Lawrence now remembered that Marhay had ended his statement with a still, and hung his head in red-faced shame. I can see that your companion is very precious to you, but letting your emotions dull your thinking is misplacing your priorities. My apologies. Not at all. If my wife were in danger, I, too, would likely find it impossible to calm myself, Marhay said, smiling. Lawrence saw this and bowed his head again, though his heart thudded at the word wife. He realized that if Holo were a mere traveling companion, he would not be so upset, and Holo herself would not have sacrificed herself to help him escape. Back to the problem at hand, then. Our opponent is a canny company that will not easily be thwarted. You and your partner have no theoretical value to them, yet they targeted you. There must be a reason. Do you have any idea what it might be? Lawrence did not have any such idea. When he thought the situation through, though, he realized that there must be some special reason for them to be captured. He mulled it over. There was only one possibility. No, that can't be. Have you thought of something? Lawrence had immediately dismissed the possibility when it first occurred to him. It simply couldn't be, yet it was the only thing he could think of. The profit before us is almost unimaginable. We need only realize it. If you've thought of something, no matter how trivial, please tell me. Marhay's request was entirely reasonable, but Lawrence's realization was not something to be shared lightly. Lawrence thought about Holo, who was undeniably not human. Most people would call her a demon. Such demons were either hidden away at home or given over to the church. Neither was any way to live. Once the church cast its eye on such a person, he or she would certainly be executed. Holo was indistinguishable from such a possessed individual. The Medio Company could use her to blackmail the Malone Company. If the Malone Company did not want it revealed to the church that they had dealings with someone possessed by a demon, they would have to withdraw. If it came to an inquisition, the Medio Company could righteously accuse the Malone Company and Lawrence of having entered into an evil contract with a demonic entity. It went without saying that Holo would be burned at the stake. Yet Lawrence still found himself skeptical. Who had discovered Holo's wolf's ears and tail, and when? Given Holo's normal appearance, it wasn't something easily discernible. He believed that no one except himself knew the truth of her identity. Mr. Lawrence, said Marhay, putting an end to Lawrence's musings, have you thought of something? Lawrence couldn't help nodding at Marhay's patient question, which meant he would now have to divulge the truth. But if the real reason for their pursuit was something else, he would have exposed Holo's secret for naught. In the worst case, the Malone Company could turn the tables on the Medio Company by accusing them of using a demon girl to blackmail them. If that happened, there would be no hope for Holo. Marhay gazed seriously across the table. Lawrence saw no avenue of escape. But they were interrupted. Excuse me, said a Malone Company representative, entering the room. What is it? We just received a letter. It regards our current situation. The employee held out a neatly sealed envelope. Marhay took it and flipped it over. The senator's name was missing, but it did have a destination. To the wolf and the forest in which it resides? In that instant, Lawrence realized he'd been right. I'm sorry, but might I take a look at that letter first? Marhay looked at Lawrence dubiously, but at length nodded and handed the envelope over. Lawrence thanked him and, taking a deep breath, broke the seal. There was a letter inside and a bit of what might have been Holo's brown fur. The letter was brief. We have the wolf. The church's doors are always open. If you don't want the wolf in your home, shut your doors and keep your family inside. There was no longer any room for doubt. Lawrence returned the wolf to Marhay. My companion, Holo, is the wolf god of the harvest, he said in a wrung-out voice. Marhay's eyes opened as wide as they ever got.